Hey there, and welcome back to Northwest Craftsman. Today is going to be a direct continuation off of the last episode, and we're going to be jumping straight in. If you haven't seen the last episode yet about how to build your floating shelf, go ahead and click right here and you can see how to do that. For this particular floating shelf, we're going to be finishing it off with a deep satin black, and because this is a direct continuation from the last episode, we're going to be jumping straight into a time lapse. So, hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Okay, well that finishes the sanding portion of it, and I do have to say, as much as sanding is not fun, it really does leave a super nice finish on there. This bucket of water that I have right here is specifically because I'm going to try and wipe this guy down with some paper towels to try and get some of the sawdust off of it, because you can see that it's filled a bunch of the grooves, so I know that it's across the surface here, but I want to try and make sure that's really nice and clean before I go through to stain it so that we don't get any pieces that come up. So, here we go. With that all wiped down and clean now, I'm going to let it go ahead and sit in the sun for a few more minutes so that it can dry out fully. Worst thing you can do with a non-water-based stain is to apply the stain while the wood is still wet, because it's going to change the rate at which it soaks in. And given some of the tests that I've done on some scrap pieces of wood, I am not going to be using the pre-stain on this because the black stain is so intensely black that really I couldn't see a difference on any of the test pieces that I did. I'll post a separate video looking for those test pieces so that you can kind of see the reasons why you'd want to use pre-stain, although I may need to post a separate video because the black is just black as can be. So you'll notice that I'm stirring with a skewer right now, like a barbecue skewer, and the reason is that I did not have any popsicle sticks on hand or stir sticks on hand, and so I will promptly be purchasing a box of popsicle sticks, because this is not the only time that I'm going to be mixing stains and otherwise. So I also highly recommend that you get a box of those, because during this project there's been a few of those things that I just hadn't even thought of needing that I decided that I was going to end up needing. So unless you have little tiny wooden sticks around that are fairly well dust and debris free, I'd recommend getting the popsicle sticks. Also, I am amazed by how black this stuff is. This stuff is literally like black as sin, and I mean honestly, if sin had a color, I swear this stuff would be it. So we'll see how nicely and how evenly it goes on, but right now it's looking pretty intense. Alrighty then, well there's the first coat done. You can see that it is just black as can be. Just absolutely astonishing to me how black that stuff is. Well, we'll give it an hour and then we'll come back to it and we'll see if it needs to get a sanding, because the recommendation is at least 2 to 3 coats. It's humorous. The advertising says 1 coat, but when you read the fine print on the instructions, surprise, it says you should do 2 to 3 coats for the best result. So we'll see what it looks like when we come back to it. We'll see if the grain raised. That's one of the things that they talk about, is if the grains raise when you put it on there. Then you want to sand it down lightly, clean it off again, and then go ahead and give it a 2nd and 3rd coat. So we'll see what it looks like, and we'll see you in an hour. So here's what it looks like after the first coat. You can see that there's still some spots that I missed just a little bit right here. There's also some streakiness across it. Overall, the color's really not that bad. Not as bad as I expected it to be. But there was a little bit of grain raising that you can feel when you kind of rub your hands across it, although frankly, it's so light that I'm not going to worry about it. I'm more concerned about what's going to happen if I try to resand it and get it clean before I put the following coat on. Over on some of my test samples right here, you can kind of see I went a little bit thicker, and they're not tacky anymore, but it came out really, really thick, and I didn't really like the way that it looked, so I tried to go extra light on this guy right here. So to speed up on the 2nd coat, to show you guys, I'm just going to do a time lapse of it, so go ahead and enjoy. Here's what it looks like after 2 coats of the stain and poly. You can see a little bit of the sheen, which I expected after because of the poly portion of the stain. But one of the things that I was a little bit disappointed about is that there are still definitely brush marks in it. And you can see it especially when you kind of tilt it into the light right here on this face. You can see the brush marks through there. So one of the things that I'm going to do to both get rid of the raised grain and to get rid of the brush marks is I'm going to go ahead and lightly sand this with 400 grit sandpaper, and then go ahead and put another coat on it after we wipe it down. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys another time lapse to hurry through the sanding process and finishing process. Well, there it is for the 3rd coat. You can see it's nice and wet and shiny right now, although it does look like we got a lot of the brush marks and raised grain out of there. If that finish that I'm seeing on the top is anything like it's going to be when it's dry, it looks like it's going to be really, really nice. As always, if you guys have any good tips for doing this better than what I'm doing right here, or have anything else that you'd like to comment on so that I can not make mistakes that I may not even know that I'm making right now, please let me know. I am always all ears to those kinds of suggestions. So we'll let this guy sit all night, come back to it once it's dry, and we'll see how it looks in the end once it is all dried up, and then we'll go ahead and make sure it fits right and get it mounted. So here it is after the 3rd coat and a night and day to let it dry. You can see the finish came out just really, really nicely. There's, just small brush strokes that you can see, and it blends in a little bit with the wood grain, but I also didn't do a crazy job sanding it as I was going through in the pre-steps. This top side came out really, really nicely. And I think the reason for that is when I was painting it, I had it up like this, or when I was staining it, I had it up like this. And on the can, it says to go with a thin layer, which I took very literally and went with very thin layers as I went through, but that didn't allow it to settle evenly. And so on this very last coat, after I sanded it on the top, I went through and I had it just a hair thicker than a thin coat. So I didn't put it on thick, but I also didn't try and spread it all the way across the top. And I think what that allowed to happen is that gravity kind of helped to settle out any of the brush marks on the top. Whereas on the sides, when I tried to do the same thing, you couldn't get that much on there before it would start to drip. And I definitely didn't want any dripping, so I went just a hair thinner with it. So if I was to go back and do this over again, and that is an absolutely crucial portion of the design, like if you can't accept a finish like this, then I would go through and sand the top more so that you don't get the defects that you see kind of up here in the top on the wood. But then also paint it one side at a time, making sure that it's face up. When you stain it one side at a time, it'll allow that gravity feed to kind of work its way down. But then also sand it between each one of the layers. That was one of the things that I think really helped as well. So overall, I am really satisfied with the way that this thing looks. I'm really excited to see what it looks like when I get it mounted up. The last step that I need to do is clean up, and I'll show you how I clean up the brush right here, because cleaning up with oil can be a little bit trickier than cleaning up with water. And then I also need to tune the frame. The frame was a little bit sticky as I tried to get it in once I had glued it all together, and I think it's just because the boards weren't exactly the same size. So I'm going to go ahead and tune that up a little bit, show you guys what that looks like, and then also show you what it looks like to clean up the brush from an oil finish. But very excited. So the reason I put the paper towel down is not to protect my workbench from the workpiece, but to protect my my workpiece from my bench, because I want to make sure that this finish stays really nice, since this is the primary cosmetic face. And so by laying down some paper towels, it allows me to make sure that that face can stay pristine, especially as I'm working up here and putting some force on it. So the reason I laid down the paper towel right here is not to protect my workbench from the piece like I had the plastic bags when I was finishing this, but is more to protect the piece or the shelf from my workbench, because any of the little bits of debris or any of the bumps on my workbench, I don't want to damage the finish on here. So by laying down the paper towels, it allows me to protect the piece, especially as we're fine tuning. Now, when we go ahead and try this in here, you'll notice that on this side right here, which is supposed to sit just about flush, it is not fitting nicely. And it's just because I think this piece is a little bit thicker than this 1x2 that sat over here. However, on this side, if we try and fit it in, it fits pretty nicely all the way up until about halfway through, and actually until you get to about the 1x2 that's on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and plane some of these faces off a little bit, take off just a hair of thickness across it so that they fit nicely. But in the end, we do want it to be a little bit tight, because when it's tight, it'll allow this to fit nicely without us needing to positively secure it. Although one of the ideas that I was given is that when this does get installed, when this is sitting about like here, on this side towards the back, because this is the bottom face, we can go ahead and put a pilot and another screw that'll go into this so that it is the securing feature, so that it's impossible for this to slide off. Because remember, this is going to get secured to the wall in the end. Alright, so I just found what I found again when I unscrewed both of these guys to try and plane this surface off, is that as soon as I took both of these out, the whole piece settled down and it ended up flush with it. And when I look on the inside, I can see that it shifted that direction a little bit, and I'm not exactly sure why it's not sitting level, but as I look inside here, it's definitely not because it's getting caught up on these edges. We have plenty of clearance on the top and bottom of these edges over here, but something is causing it to rock backwards. And so instead of trying to re-drill pilot holes through here, because frankly I think that's probably the easiest thing to do given that this is not a cosmetic piece, I can't really because I've already put stress in the wood right here, and I don't want to try and mount the entire shelf when I'm this close to a breakout point on it. So what I've done is I cut a new backing for it that is the same length as it was previously, and I'm going to go ahead and mark the other two fastener locations right here. And then on this one, I'm just going to scooch it this direction, or once I unfasten this top piece, I will mark where it actually sits on the inside with respect to this piece of wood. Drill new pilot holes, drill new pilot holes, drill new, put new screws in there, and call it a night. Well, making that final adjustment to this guy took a lot longer than expected, but it did work in the end, and it's nice and flush all the way through here. I'll talk about some of the recommendations that I have at the end of the video, but I definitely have a few of them from this project. But as of now, it is ready to mount. I'll see if I can't get a picture of it when it's mounted in the office. I'll be doing that tomorrow evening. But for you guys, it'll show up instantaneously at the end of the episode. So thank you for joining me on this one. I will talk to you in a second. Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. One of the things that I wanted to let you know is that as I was making this video, I realized it was getting pretty long. So for cleaning a brush that has been used on an oil-based product, I went ahead and separated that into its own video, and we'll be posting that soon. So keep an eye on the feed and you're going to see that popping out. I also wanted to share some of the things that I learned this episode. Number one, get a dust mask. I did not get a dust mask before when I went through this, and so for both the sanding, just the raw finished product with the wood, and then also on the second coat of polyene stain that I did, it just burned. Like I could feel it in my lungs, I could feel it in my mouth, I could feel it in my nose and sinuses, and that's just an awful idea. I was doing some more research, and in the long run, that fine sawdust getting into your lungs and sinuses can cause scarring, and in your lungs that can lead to lung disease and a variety of other things, especially when you're sanding stains that have other nasty things on the inside of them. So as soon as I got done with this episode, I ordered both the popsicle sticks that I forgot and a dust mask, and I highly recommend if you guys are going to be doing sanding of any kind, and frankly a lot of the other woodworking that we're doing that can produce some fine particles, get a good reusable dust mask that you can just use on a regular basis, because it's better safe than sorry when you're dealing with stuff like that. The second thing that I learned is that your prep work on your finish is really important. So as I was going through and I was applying the different coats of finish, when I said, oh, I don't really need to take the raised grain out of this the first time, or oh, I don't really need to take the brush marks out of this on the first coat, or I think on the second coat I'm going to try and do it. I did it on the second coat and it turned out all right in the end, but I think had I gone through from the very beginning and done the prep work to actually take the raised grain out before I put any stain on there, take the brush marks out on the first coat, take the brush marks out on the second coat, and really pay attention to it at each step of the process, it comes out just orders of magnitude better. So highly recommend you take the time and go slowly if you really want your finish to turn out nice, because if you rush your finish, it's only going to turn out poorly. So the third thing that I noticed, if you really want your cosmetic faces to be nice with your finish, is to make sure that they're vertically facing. When you look at the video that's playing right now, you can see how in the time lapse it starts to smooth itself out, and you can see this on the side that when I do the brush marks, you can see the brush marks initially and then they slowly wipe themselves out. And if you really want to make sure that they're clean, I would face them vertically, because the one face that I had vertically, that thin piece, is the most cosmetic face that's going to be used because it's facing straight out and doesn't have stuff setting on top of it. But that face turned out nicer than any of the other faces that I have. So to really get it nice, make sure that you do it one face at a time and make sure that face is facing vertically. So the fourth thing that I learned, and I'm not even really sure if it's a lesson learned on this, but I spent far too much time in the end trying to get my the internal portion of the floating shelf to fit into this sleeve. And there was a variety of different things that were going on. The first things that I showed you guys was the just the raw not fit of the 1x2s, and that's fine because they were raw pieces of wood to start with, and I didn't finish them. I didn't make them dimensional to start with. Had I started off with truly dimensionally accurate lumber all the way through, it would probably have turned out better. And so a little bit of fine tuning there is not really that big of an issue. However, once I started getting to the end and I realized that as I'm setting it to the inside of the shelf, and I had that just little tiny lip that was showing, trying to figure out the root cause of why it was hanging up was just insane. And I went through and I shaved a bunch of faces and I did a whole lot of other stuff. And it wasn't until I actually unfastened everything that I realized that end piece was sitting in there crooked. And so what I ended up doing in the end is just putting a whole new back plate on it and just assembling it in place. And so that's one way that you can kind of get around it, is just to assemble in place. One of the other things that I thought of is that if I kept away from the back face, so everything mounted straight up to that front face, and so if I was to back it off just a hair and give it a little bit more room to breathe on the inside of the floating shelf, it probably would have gone a little bit more smoothly. And then you can just secure it in place with one of the set screws. I didn't use a set screw because it was tight enough, but you just throw a pilot hole and a set screw through the bottom and then it locks itself into place. Those are some of the things that I learned during today's episode. If I didn't answer any of your questions, go ahead and put them in the comment section down below. Go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel as well. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, it is a huge way for you to help us on the channel. You'll get notified when we post videos, and it just helps the channel to grow as a whole. And this is one of those things that I would love to reach as many people as possible in kind of sharing this woodworking journey that I'm on. The other ways that you can support us is by going to Instagram and following us on Instagram, and then we also have a Facebook page that we're posting to as well. Thank you guys very much. Can't wait for the next video, and I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great one. Bye.